Treated it like it was a Tuesday. The kids are back off today as we're kind of fine-tuning the game plan and doing all those sorts of things, and be back ready to go for the rest of the week to play North Carolina here. I know their record's not what they want it to be. They've certainly faced their share of adversity, but I know they'll be anxious and ready to play this weekend, so we've got to do the same.
Raise your hands. Get your microphone.
How was the pumpkin patch on Saturday?
It was good. It was fun. The girls had a good time. We had a good time. Came home for naps and watched a little football and reveled in the joy of letting somebody else sweat out 3rd and 5, and whether to punt or go for it and all that kind of good stuff.
When you have a bye week like that, you have a couple practices. Is there time devoted to sort of self-scouting? Do you take a look inward at all during that time period?
Sure. I think, we kind of set out objectives to accomplish during the week. One of them is to take a good look at ourselves in all 3 phases of the game, what we're doing well, what we're not doing well, if there is anything we can do to help those things, tendencies, so on and so forth. We take some good time there, along with focusing on some key teaching or scheme points to make through the week, and also a little bit of preparing for the next opponent.
When you have a kickoff guy who's been as efficient in putting it through the end zone as Joey has been, and a punter who's been as good as with hang time as Oscar has been, is it challenging sometimes to keep your coverage teams engaged?
Well, I think more so on kickoff than punt, but yeah, I mean that's a constant message to our guys on our kickoff coverage team is we can't take it for granted. We can't relax. Not just because you may play in some windy conditions as you get later in the year, but you just can't take it for granted. Our guys have done a good job of that. I think they're eager to cover kicks. The way I've seen them cover the couple that have been returned, I think they're anxious to get those opportunities. But I think James Shebest and Brian Mitchell do a great job of keeping those guys on edge and continue to focus on our fundamentals in terms of covering those kicks. I don't hear us bring that up as much on punt, just because it doesn't take much for one gunner to get held up or a punt to be a little bit not as high, and all of a sudden you got a return opportunity. So but we have done a good job, and we will have to do those things. In my mind, just looking at our team at the midway point, for us to give ourselves a chance to win, we're going to have to do all of those little things as we continue through the season in terms of winning the field position battle. We won a game or two in our first 6 games, not only because of the field position battle, but it played a huge role in us being able to win, particularly the first game. And, us continuing to emphasize and accomplish those things, whether it's down and punts in the red zone or eliminating return yards, is going to be huge for us moving forward.
You had plenty of guys dinged up before the bye. Was that a fortuitous time for the off week, and Cam specifically, as he looked good this week?
Well, the thing I would tell you is, yeah, it did come at a good time. We're still working through a decent number of guys that are, I guess day-to-day is the best way to say it. I mean, we're just, particularly in our offensive skill positions, I'm not really sure who's going to play on Saturday, quite honestly. None of them are major things. We usually kind of tell you guys when we have big, huge season ending or things like that. None of them are like that, but we're just dealing with a bunch of those right now. And, that's part of football and part of the season and what we've got to get moving forward. I'm certainly not complaining about it. I'm just telling you there's, a handful of guys that are like that just going to be – they're going to practice some and rest some and practice some and see if we can manage it the best we can. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kind of piggybacking off that, I know there's some optimism about Phil Patterson maybe returning after the bye. Is he practicing now?
He is, and he's just like I put him in that group of guys that, in my opinion, it's important for Phil it's important to Phil for him to make it back. He wants to go play and play at a high level and wants to do it as quickly as possible. So we've been pleased with him and his progress or his urgency to get back. It'll just be a matter of some of it's or most of it's kind of beyond your control, how his body feels moving forward.
UNC's played 2 different quarterbacks this year. Does that make it more difficult to prepare, or are they both kind of the same guy?
Well, I think they have similar skill sets is what I would say, just looking at them. I know they made the change last week, and it'll be interesting to see what they do moving forward. But I feel like in general terms they're running the same offense with both guys. Both of them are athletic guys. They're not afraid to run the football. So I think just kind of big picture wise, they're pretty similar in their skill sets.
Given the changes that UNC has had, the injuries that you mentioned at the top, and the fact that last year's game was played in a hurricane, how valuable or not valuable at all is any kind of video or looking at last year's game for preparation of this year?
That was a pretty extreme game. I mean, I don't know that. Certainly to my knowledge, I don't think we're preparing for conditions like that. So I mean, I don't know how much good that video does for either side. It was just such a unique situation that, and that's that was, again, and we've talked about this before. That was in the past, and it was a unique situation. So not much.
Anybody else for Coach?
I might butcher his pronunciation. Duius, you played him
Drake.
in the last
That's
game.
what I call him, Drake.
Is this kind of at the very last point of the season where you would burn a red shirt on somebody? You have to make hard and fast decisions with guys like that?
Well, to the best of our ability, we really felt like, well, first of all, we were in a situation in the game 2 weeks ago where we didn't have a lot of choice, but we had been preparing him for that. He had been working on the outside, or has been working on the outside. Long term, I think he's going to be a tight end, but he has some unique skill set in there. So, I would prefer. It's not always. Sometimes it's beyond our control. I would prefer. Obviously, the later you get in the season, to not burn those guys. But our plan for him when we did decide to play him was that he would continue to play a role. It wasn't just throwing him in there to go block a couple guys. Like we feel good about him and his development.
Coach, what are UNC's strengths, and how do you get your team pumped up for a team that has one win and make sure that they don't overlook this week?
Well, you don't have to look at the film very long to realize that they've got good players. They're very well coached. I know they've had some hard luck. But when you look at their defensive line and their skill players on offense, so their defensive line on defense, their skill players on offense, if you're not in the right gap or you're not coming off the ball the right way, they can make you look pretty bad pretty quickly. I don't think that'll be an issue. And we've got a tremendous amount of respect for Coach Fedora and the program they've got there at North Carolina and the history and the talent that they have on that roster. So they've certainly got our guys' full attention.
I know there are tons of factors that go into recruiting. Does a head-to-head matchup with a team in a state that you're recruiting pretty heavily, does that factor in a lot in guys' decisions, or is that sort of a secondary?
Well, I'm sure it does. But, to me, I don't – if I was advising an 18-year-old on deciding where to go to school, I don't know that I would stake a large portion of that on one football game. I think there are a lot of other factors that are much more important to their happiness and their day-to-day life that don't have to do with what happens on one particular Saturday for 4 hours. So I'm sure in their minds there's an element of that, but ultimately you're making a decision about where you're going to go to school and who you're going to play for and the program you're going to represent. To me, one game shouldn't define that one way or the other.
Coach Trayvon McMillan received a significant number of the carries against Boston College. Is his role going to be larger going forward, or are you still going with more of a by-committee approach at this point?
Well, we'll see. I mean, part of that is because Steven wasn't able to play a couple weeks ago. Part of it is because Trayvon was playing well and taking care of the football. I mean, I certainly anticipate that he'll be the guy that runs out there this week, and if he continues to play well, then he'll continue to stay in there. That doesn't mean that if he makes one mistake, he's never going to play again. That's not what I'm saying. I just, some of it is where we're at in the season and who's available, and some of it is, I think playing well is really important to Trayvon, and we appreciate his work ethic and how he's tried to approach things.
Is Sean Savoy back with the team? And I can't imagine what he's going through, but how's he holding up?
Yes, he's back. I would say as well as can be expected. That's about how I'd characterize that. I do think, I don't want to put words in Sean's mouth, but I do think it was somewhat therapeutic to get back around his friends and his player, his teammates. But I mean, that's those of us that have been through things like that, or can only imagine what it's like to go through things like that. I mean, it's going to take time, and Sean knows that we're here for him in whatever he needs, and that we genuinely love and care about him, and want to help him be the best in everything he does, but also know that he's going through a lot of emotions that come with something like that.
Hey, Coach, I know it's 1-0 every week, but can you speak to this last sort of 6-game stretch, the second half? It's all conference opponents, familiar opponents, and how this stretch will kind of shape the perception about the season and this team?
Well, sure. I mean, it's a tremendous challenge moving forward. Looking at our league, and particularly our side, first of all, I'd say our schedule was somewhat symmetrical in terms of non-conference games, and then 2 conference games, both from the other division. And then now our straight run of interdivision play. And I think anything can happen. To me, it's going to be about our ability to grind it out every single week. I don't think there's going to be anybody that's that much better than anybody else. As time we go through time, that may be proved different. There may be a team or two that's quite a bit better than everyone else. I don't know yet, but every single week's going to be hard. It's going to be really difficult, and we've got to have enough grit and determination to do the little things week in and week out to give ourselves a chance to win. So I'm anxious for it. I don't know how it's all going to go. I know what we've got to do in terms of all the little things like the turnover battle and winning field position to give this group that we have this year the best chance to win.
Coach, you've done such a great job with the team this year with not turning over the football so much. What are some of the things you stress to make sure that the players, protect the football and do all those things?
Well, I think the first thing is we have adjusted a slight tweak on technique that I think has been good. We've made it a huge point of emphasis, not just in our drill work, but in our team settings. I think the guys have kind of embraced that part of it. I think maybe we've done a little better job as coaches drilling it into them, not just during drill work, but during big team settings. And then we've been able to creates a little bit of depth. I think guys know that it's tied to playing time. I think guys know that for us to have a chance to win, that this has to happen. And if you want to stay on the field, you certainly need to take care of the ball. And then I think Josh deserves some credit for it. Josh has been pretty judicious in his decision making, and done a pretty good job taking care of the ball.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 o'clock.
Thank you all.